Hello, and welcome to Define American with Jose Antonio Vargas. I'm Jose. When the first Trump administration began in 2017, it was an incredibly dark time for the immigrant rights movement and for immigrants in general. Then, as now, Trump ran on an anti immigrant agenda.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
He kicked off his first administration by instituting a Muslim ban and separating families at the border, and went on to enact his Remain in Mexico policy, you remember that, which barred legal asylum seekers from crossing the border and built stretches of wall along the U.S. Mexico border. Immediately after Trump's first inauguration, masses of people flooded the streets of the nation's capital and cities across the country for the Women's March, estimated to be the largest day of protests in United States history. And when Trump announced his Muslim ban a few days later, Americans spontaneously rushed to the streets and to the airports to offer support for people who are impacted by the ban, who are being held in the terminals. But this time around, the crowds for the newly rebranded People's March that took place 2 days before Trump's second inauguration were only about the 10th of a size of what it was 8 years ago. And when Trump announced his executive orders attempting to bar asylum seekers and end birthright citizenship, most of us, I don't know where you were, most of us watched from our couches. So I wanted to bring in a good friend of mine who knows a whole lot about protest movements to talk about the state of the resistance this time around and can talk about the role of art, of storytelling, the role of artists in inspiring social change, especially on an issue like immigration. My guest today is a real Renaissance woman. She's the co-founder and the artistic director of the Women's March in 2017. She's an artist, a filmmaker, a best-selling author. She's written fiction and nonfiction, and really so much more. Please welcome Paola Mendoza. Thank you so much, Paola, for joining me and joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It warms my heart to be here with you on this terrible day of the first full day of the Donald Trump administration. But to be here in community with you, to talk about immigration, to talk about art, seems like the best way to start the fight against what's going to be a long, hard 4 years.
A long, hard 4 years. So for context, and you just mentioned it, we're recording this conversation the day after the inauguration. And I was just curious, Paola, where were you? Where were you watching?
Where was I in hell? It was MLK Day, as we all know. So that meant that my son didn't have school. And that meant I was being a mom. Yeah. And we had a sleepover with a friend the night before. So I had 2 boys in my home. And I went about my day being a mom, and then I had decided that I was going to spend my day creating, that I was going to spend my day writing, that I was going to spend my day working specifically on a project that I've been working on it's fairly new, but 2 months, but I wanted to be in creation because that is where I see myself in the next 4 years of really using my art and my voice in a way to elevate stories that I hope create and inspire change, which is what I've done for the past 20 years of my life. So
across mediums.
Across all different mediums. Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I know anybody who kind of has done really the full range, right? With books, fiction, nonfiction, documentary, narrative, right? Short films, all of that. Can you tell us what this project is?
Yeah. So I'm writing a screenplay, of which I haven't done in a long time, in like 7 years, because I've spent the last 7 years writing 2 books. And I'm writing a genre film, which also is like not my comfort zone. And I say it's a mashup between Get Out, the film, and Rhinoceros, the play by UNESCO. So it's Get Out and Rhinoceros smashed up together to talk about authoritarianism.
That's amazing. And again, you spent your day creating. I'm curious, by the way, Mateo, your son, is what now? 10?
11. About to be
Mateo's
12. Yes, he's in middle school. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, time really flies. What has been the conversation with Mateo about what's happening?
Yeah, so it's crazy to think about it in the context of my son's life. In 2016, the day that Hillary Clinton lost the nomination, the election, I should say, I was at the Javits Center thinking that she was going to win.
remember.
Yes,
Yes.
it was a terrible, terrible
I remember
night.
we were texting.
Yes.
Yes.
And I got home to my house at like 1 a.m, completely devastated. And I went straight to my son's room, who at the time he was like 2 or 3. And I whispered in his ear, completely devastated, "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." It was the only thing I could say to him about that moment, about what the future was going to be, about the fear I was feeling. And then the next 4 years was a constant fight. I was one of the founders of the Women's March, but then I was focused as so hardcore on immigration and doing everything I could to fight against, at that time, Donald Trump's immigration policies. And Mateo was very much involved in what was going on. Family separation, he knew about it. MPP, he was aware of it. And
MPP
then
is
Remain in Mexico.
Remain in Mexico, yes.
Sorry,
that
Migrant
policy.
Protection Protocols. It's MPP, Remain in Mexico, that is now back. This time around, the day after Trump's inauguration, Mateo and I were in bed, and now he's almost 12. And so it's a different conversation. Now it's not apologizing to him. Now it's rather, talking about my fears for him. And this is what I think about as a mom. He's 12 years old. He will have had 8 years right now of Donald Trump in his life, out of his 12 years of life. By the end of his administration, by the end of this administration's time, it will be 12 years of this boy and all boys, formative years being influenced by a man that I find to be horrifying and horrible and a misogynist and violent and all of these things. And so the conversation this time around was talking about how sad I was and also saying to him, you're now going to be going off on your own as a teenager, and you're going to be making decisions on your own. And that's normal and natural. You're going to push me away, which is totally fine. But what I want you to be aware of is that you have to make the decisions in your life as a young teenager that come from a place of compassion. The world around you, Donald Trump and all of these people and the video games and the social media, it's all going to be telling you something different. It's going to be the opposite of compassion. But I hope and I pray that you make your decisions out of compassion and that your friends do as well. And that's a very different place to be in than when he was 2 years old. And I'm really terrified as a mom of a young boy who loves video games, who's an athlete, who is a regular, typical, quote unquote, what one would imagine like just boy, but is very sensitive and is very aware and trying to make sure that that awareness and that sensitivity and that compassion doesn't get lost in this really harsh world that wants to squash that, especially in men, especially in boys.
What you're making me think is, so you have now, a 12-year-old and the idea of masculinity, the idea of what's acceptable behavior. That.
Yeah, that's. I think this moment in time of where we are at the end of the day is about gender and gender dynamics, and whether or not we abide by traditional gender dynamics that have been imposed on us, or whether we try and change those and become more expansive. And that might be choosing our gender with regards to what it means to be trans, but that also means, what is the role of women? What is the role of women in this world? And then, in comparison, what is the role of men? How does men's roles change if women are changing their own roles? And so, to me, that's what we're seeing. We are seeing Trump and all of the men that he has in his administration. They all have problems and violence, and have been accused of violence against women in one shape or form or another. And at the beginning of when he was choosing his cabinet, I was like, wow, he's choosing all these men in spite of their moments of bad sexual misconduct with women. But now I believe actually he's chosen them because of that misconduct. To tell us, to tell women, to tell the general populace, you cannot take down, you cannot destroy powerful men because they are bad to women. Again, this is a gender dynamic. It is, we can destroy and hurt women, and you can't do anything to us. We will still rise to power, and we will be in places of power, regardless of what we've done to women, regardless of what we've done to other people. And so to me, that is the epitome of toxic masculinity, obviously, and that is the world that, again, it goes back to my son and all these young boys, what they're growing up in. This is what is being fed to them all over the place. And it's terrifying because as a mom, I can only influence my son so much. Meanwhile, the world and the amount of time that he's been influenced by the world that we're living in is scary.
So now, actually, I'll never forget, I flew to D.C. the night before the Women's March because I knew there was going to be a lot. I was like, I showed up. I'm like, I'm your assistant, right?
Yeah.
And then I was with you that entire day backstage. And, you know, I just remembered all the work that went into that, right? I mean, you were literally the artistic director, making sure that everybody was, I won't name them, but there were a few men who showed up.
Yes.
A few men who showed up.
Wanted to be on stage.
Just hanging out, just assuming, talk about toxic masculinity, just assuming that because they are who they are, they can just go speak.
Yes.
You know, and I think watching you kind of navigate all of that. And now, again, you know, yesterday meeting, the day of the inauguration, what was in your mind in terms of what the resistance looked like the day of the inauguration?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it in your opening. I think we have to see where we are, where the People's March / Women's March of this year versus 2017, and the difference of that. And, you know, I was not in support of the People's March moving forward. We had conversations with the organizers to try and convince them to not do it. And that is because it's not because I don't believe people going out to the street is important or valid. It 100% is. But the pulse of the country is somewhere else. The pulse of the nation is somewhere else. And we have gone out to the streets, if we talk about 2017 as the beginning, though obviously it was not, time and time again for years and years and years and years and years. And we lost. Not only did we lose, but we lost hands down, completely lost the fight for the soul of this nation at this moment in time with the re-election of Donald Trump. And to use the same tactic yet again that didn't provide the results that we wanted in the past seems like a waste of energy and a waste of time for this moment. It doesn't mean that it's gone for forever, but it's for this moment. So the question that I'm asking myself as an artist, the question that I'm asking myself as an organizer is, what can I do strategically different? What do I need to do different to reach different people, to inspire others to do different things, to expand our minds about immigration and abortion and gender and all of these things that are at the center of their attacks. And so a small example of that, that's why I'm writing a genre horror / film about authoritarianism, because what I would have done in the past is written something about authoritarianism as a drama. And I'm like, okay, that's not working for what I want to do as an artist. So let me try something very different. That's very scary. I've never written a horror film. I like horror films.
It's completely at the center of popular culture.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's how we need to be thinking about our organizing, and how we need to be thinking about our resistance as well, and how we need to be thinking about our leadership. Right now, we don't have a leader or leaders to really fall behind. That doesn't mean that we don't have leaders in this moment. It just means that we're lost. We're lost, and being lost is okay.
Unmoored.
And we're unmoored. I think that's a better word. And it's okay, but we got to find our way back.
It's fascinating hearing this from you, because I actually can't think of another artist, another human being who were at the center of being an organizer and being an artist. I mean, watching you back in 2016, 2017, you were literally collecting, organizing. If you were a celebrity or an artist, someone with influence, you were that person that was in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And clearly you've gone through some introspection about what were the learnings from that? Paola, I'm just curious. By the way,
yeah.
you and I have never talked about
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
So I'm
No.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned a lot, and it was my work as an organizer was very visible in 2017 to
Very
2018, and it's continued up until until actually quite recently, right until before the election of Donald Trump. My learnings there are that authenticity is the most important thing when telling stories about issues that might affect you or not, but that you care about. Celebrities are not our messengers.
Wait a second. Can you say that again?
Celebrities are not our messengers. And I have a lot of friends that are celebrities, and I love them dearly. And it doesn't mean that they're sidelined or that they are not to be involved in things. Not at all. Of course not. But they are not our messengers. We are our own messengers. I did a lot of work with the Green Wave from Latin America, which is the abortion movement in Latin America. And I really, along with a couple other friends of mine, Paola Mendoza being my partner from Latin America, since 2000, once Roe was overturned, what was that, 2022, really focused on bringing the green wave here to the United States. And what I learned from the Green Wave is that the Green Wave's success in Latin America was because it was a big tent that allowed for difference of opinion and thought for the same goal, which was legalize abortion. The ways in which they got to that, the tactics in which they used, the language that they used, the stories that they told were vastly different and sometimes even in contradiction of one another. But the goal was always the same. And it took them a while to be able to relate in that place of friction, but they did. And I think that's what we need to be able to do here in this country, in the progressive left, is to work within that large tent and work through moments of friction and fissure for the ultimate goal. And our ultimate goal might be not as clear as it was in the Green Wave, which was to legalize abortion. This goal might be slightly different or harder to
Pin down.
Exactly, but nonetheless, I think that's what we need to do.
What does that look like? And you mentioned this in terms of, by the way, you have been a very early and consistent supporter at Divine American. As you know, we do a lot of research. We just came up with a report that literally says, "Move them or lose them," is the title of the report.
Whoa.
Move them or lose them. And, that was really hard for me to hear because, as you know, I like my numbers. I like my data. I like my information. But the reality is you can reach some people with that. But unless we're moving people at that story level, at that granular story level, we're going to lose them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now, what is the role now, you think, for artists? If you can go a little deeper on that. When you said that trying different things, how do you think about audience now?
Well, it depends on what I'm creating, right?
What the project
yeah,
is,
what
yeah.
the project is, because my project will dictate my audience. Where before there was a certain moment in my life where I would be like, fuck it, I don't fucking care. It's all about the story that I want to tell and the truth that I want to bring forth. I don't fucking care about making it quote unquote commercial or not. And now I still care so desperately about the truth of the story that I'm telling. Authenticity. But, because I always joke, I'm like, oh yeah, 4 people have watched my movie and 2 people have read my book. That's my line.
Which is not true. Not true. But,
But it's small, but that's what I say. So now I actually don't want to just make work for that small of an audience. It's not strategic. It's not, it breaks my heart over and over to be like, oh my God, just 4 people saw my movie. So to me, it's okay, I can still be truthful and authentic with the stories that I want to tell, but what do I shift? Because the goal is ultimately the same, and this goes back to what artists need to do. I think the role of the artist in this moment in time, and has been for forever, is to tap into people's hearts and expand their hearts. Right now, we're living in a moment in this country where people's hearts are contracting. Small. It's so
Silent.
hard.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
it's they're not letting anyone in, anything different, anything. It's just no. And so the job of an artist, whatever medium we work into, is to tap into that heart and to open it up, to loosen it up a little bit. And then hopefully more and more and more until we're I want to be living in a world that is compassionate. I desperately do. That's the thing that I've taught my son. Compassion is the most important value. I think everything stems from that. And so as an artist, that's what we as artists need to do. Instill and inspire compassion.
And again, I have to say, more than 4 people have seen that. Because I remembered you and I first met when I was attending a screening of Entre Nos.
Yes.
Right, which is a film in 2000. It did the Tribeca Film Festival in 2009.
2010, something like that. Yeah.
Yes. And this is a film that was inspired by your life that you starred in. You co-directed it, you co-wrote it, you starred in it.
Yes.
It's a beautiful film.
Thank you.
And I'm bringing it up because, please tell our watchers and our listeners about your immigrant story.
Oh, my personal immigrant story.
Yes.
It's interesting because I was thinking about it in the context of the executive order that was released this morning that talks about birthright citizenship and how, I won't get into the details of it, but essentially, there's one part of the executive order that says if the mom is here on a visa and she has a child, the child is not considered an American citizen. One of many things in which it lists in the EO. And so my immigration story actually starts with my mom being born in the United States in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because my grandfather was here on scholarship, and his first 2 children were born in the United States. And then when my mom was 6 months old, they all went back to Colombia. So my mom just happened to have an American passport. No one ever was interested in coming to the United States. My family had been in Colombia for centuries, literally. But then my mom had an American passport. And so when she was 23, 24 years old, her marriage was falling apart in Colombia. She had 2 children. I was 3. My brother was 6 or 7 at the time. And so she decides to come to the United States to start anew because she had this American passport. And we came to the United States, to Los Angeles, and we were the first of our family to come to the United States, to be in the United States. And that began my immigration journey here in the United States. And I was thinking about that in light of the executive order, that if that were to happen today, my mother would not have been given citizenship if the executive order isn't what were enacted. My mom would not have citizenship. I would not be here as an American citizen. Of which I am now naturalized. And I just think, what a great loss for this country. Just one story of one person that has contributed and done, I think, important and valuable things for this country. And because of an executive order that is steeped in xenophobia and hate and wanting to hold on to power, we would lose millions and millions of extraordinary, and I'm not saying that I'm extraordinary, but extraordinary people that would give so much to this country. And that is the loss that we have right now, that we're contending with, that we're fighting with, that these ideas, these executive orders, they're laws that affect people, that affect generations. And that's what I want people to contend with right now.
And I think that's the struggle is, the first Trump era, when we were watching those kids being separated from their parents, we saw the worst. And to me, what I kept trying to understand was, why isn't it moving people? Why, right? Why? And now these executive orders are coming. Mind you, they've been warning, they've been saying, they've been telegraphing that this is what they're after. And again, just some numbers, and then you can unpack that for me. So this country has 48 million immigrants in it. 11 million of whom are undocumented, which I don't think is the right number. I think it's way more than 11 million people. And now what they're saying is, it doesn't matter. What I'm wrapping my head around is, this has been, the law for
150 years.
150 years.
Yeah.
What's legal, right? What's been legal. And now they're like, wait, no. So how do you wrap around, how do we now explain to a black or white country, I'm going to be really blunt about this. The way this country thinks of itself, it's a black or white country, right? Native Americans and indigenous people are usually not included in that conversation. And with the way immigration is thought of, and I'm also saying that as the fact of the matter is, 1 out of 10 black people in this country is a black immigrant, right? And yet even that isn't interesting, right? So how do we, you just lay down a very specific story of that one story of people that can't be here. How do we now tell this story to people and compel them to care about this is what ending birthright citizenship means?
Yes, I think it's the retelling of that story over and over and over. And what I mean by that is, like, we put so much emphasis on one story and the success of one film or one book or one thing, but change doesn't really happen that way. That changing someone's hearts, or like I said, opening someone's heart with compassion, it's just not one story. They have to be re-exposed and re-exposed, and person to person, ideally, right? Like if we talk about trans people in the other line of attack in the United States, I think I read somewhere 1.6 million people that are trans in this country.
1.6 million.
It's very small in number. So the fact that they have the administration is attacking this very small community in horrific ways, and people are letting it happen because they most likely don't know anyone that's trans or aren't aware that someone is trans in their life also. And so there's no proximity there. There's a lack of proximity. So I think we have to expose people to stories. We have to get proximate with people. We have to, if I were to take, and you've been down to the border as well, that's another story.
About that story.
But if I firmly believe if I were to take some right-wing person that felt a certain way about immigration, and I was to take them with me to the work that I've done at the border, and they were to sit and listen to the stories that I've heard of people, I have to believe that they would be moved. That they might say, like, oh, okay, it's not an invasion of our country, but like I can understand why people are coming here because they're fleeing horrific violence. And okay, they're not rapists and murderers and sick and all of these things. They're just people, because I saw a mom with a 3-year-old daughter who was raped along the way, and there was a horrible story. Like, I believe that would move people. The question is, and this is again where the right is really extraordinary, all of our media outlets are now slowly being controlled by the right.
Well,
and so how do we get these stories out to people if they can't be proximate in person? And so that's the terrifying thing. Who the fuck is going to buy TikTok now? Like, that has me terrified. Is it going to be Elon Musk?
Probably.
Yeah. And then we're totally fucked.
Well, wait a second.
Nazi saluting Elon Musk is going to own TikTok and X/Twitter?
So wait, let me back up a few strands in
Yes.
what you're saying. Because the media here is not a slice of the pie, it's the actual pan. Right? Like, I remember, look, it took me a while to get into Succession. Because if I'm gonna watch something with just all white people, like I have to be like, okay, what is this telling us about the human condition? And after the 3 episodes, I was like, okay, this is Shakespearean.
Yes.
I got it. This is Shakespeare. I don't know if you remember the first episode, right? Logan Roy, who owns like a Fox News media empire-like thing, says to his daughter, Shiv, who was working as a political consultant, says, politics, Shiv, is what comes out of the asshole. Wouldn't you want to be out front feeding the horse?
Right.
That's what we're living through.
Exactly.
Who's feeding the horse? Right? And I think this is where our understanding of media, it's fascinating to think of how much control they have, that other side has.
Yeah.
While here we are still educating people on what's the basis of, I was just doing a MSNBC hit a couple of nights ago, and a journalist, I think the person was a journalist, was like, "Oh, I don't understand immigration as a process."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "Wait, but isn't that like your job?"
Job? Yeah.
Wait, so like we've elected this guy twice now, and he's run on immigration as a central campaign issue, and you're telling me that you don't understand the process of immigration?
Wow. That's terrifying.
But that's I actually
where we
think
are.
I actually think that's what we're living through. And now, I mean, as we say this, I actually want to talk about your most recent book, Solis. Am I saying it right?
Yes, you are. I know a lot of people say Solis, but
your
no, it's
influence
Solis.
on me, right? Because this is the second, right, of two young adult novels. By the way, before I ask that question, can you talk to us why young adult novels? Because that's an interesting strategy.
Yes. Well, I think if we can get that compassion in young people's hearts early, it's a lot harder for it to be taken by the influences of the world, social media, Donald Trump, Elon Musk. That's one. Again, obviously, I have a young boy, so that's personal to me too. And then also, a lot of people don't know this, but young adult novels are actually the majority of the audience is adults.
Yes.
So it's a way in which to have an intergenerational audience. And these books are meant in an ideal world to be intergenerationally read because they bring up a lot of things for young people, a lot of questions, a lot of fears, a lot of uncertainties. And so ideally there's an adult there that is reading with them and they're both engaged and entertained so they can have these conversations. And yeah, I've had so many conversations in public schools all across the country, in person and in Zoom. And it is so amazing to me, just the machinations of wanting to understand the immigration process in the United States from these young people. They're like, but how does this work? And how does this work? And why this? And why that? And it's because it's all in the ether and they hear all of these things and it's not explained.
Nobody explains it.
No one explains it.
Wait, in the country, which is unless you're Native American or brought here forcibly as an enslaved person.
Exactly.
You came from somewhere. So it's this delusion and this amnesia, right? And so young adult novels, getting that in early on was the thinking.
Yes.
Okay. So, and again, your most recent one, Solis, right, takes place in 2033.
Yes.
So just 8 years into the future, in a world where undocumented immigrants are microchipped and tracked and forced into labor camps.
Yes.
Do you feel like that's where we're headed?
I pray to God not, because the world of Solis is a dark world. That is not the world that we want to live in. You know, when I started writing the book with my co-writer Abby, it was and Sanctuary too was a clarion call. It was, we don't want this world. This is where we could be headed. This is my imagination. Lived in it and with it for 6 years, and we don't want this world. And after Donald Trump was elected, I was like, okay, it's not really a clarion call anymore because we're kind of here and we could easily get there. Like, I think now it's actually a blueprint for resistance. And it's because these characters in Solis are in the worst of circumstances. They are trapped in a labor camp of which people are dying left and right, mining a mineral that is killing them for a government that wants to destroy them. And yet, these extraordinary characters, they find a way to fight for themselves and to fight for their freedom and to, without giving anything away, overcome so much of what is forced and heaved upon them. And I hope that readers, when they read this book, believe if Valley, if Rania, if Mami, Liliana can resist in these circumstances, then I can as well. And so I hope that's what this book inspires in people now, that it is a dark place and we are in a dark time, but through that darkness and in that darkness, there is always light. That is when you can see the light. You just have to go to it.
What are you getting prepared for in terms of worst case scenario? Like what we're actually going to be living through in the next 4 years? Because to be honest with you, Paola, I think the detention camps are a reality.
I agree with that. A lot of what's in those books is pulled straight from Donald Trump's mouth. The deportation force is what he said in 2016. It comes to life in those books. He hadn't said the detention camps, the labor camps, when we wrote them, but they're there, and I think that is what's going to happen, because what we know in this country is that incarcerating people is a money-making machine, And what we saw after Donald Trump was elected was that the stock market for a lot of those private detention centers, those companies that run the private detention centers, they rose, they skyrocketed.
Yes.
So I do think that we are going to see unprecedented amounts of people being detained for very, very long times. There's something called the Flores Agreement, which dictates that children can't be detained unless they're in quote unquote a family detention center that requires XYZ thing. I started reading in certain places that the Flores Agreement was going to be fought, or I don't even know what the legal term is, dismantled, who the fuck knows, but it wasn't going to matter anymore. So I think that's going to be the terrifying thing. And the question is where are we as a society?
Where are we as a society?
What are we morally going to accept? And for me, one of the darkest moments in the past 8 years was family separation. And we as a country ultimately said, absolutely not. We were able to stop that type of family separation in a matter of 6 to 7 weeks because we came together, we organized, we said, absolutely not. The media did its job. They brought out stories that were horrific. We clearly all remember the little girl crying.
By the way, the media, meaning the New York Times, right?
The Washington Post, the LA Times.
So let's be specific, right? So
Yes.
the top news organizations did their job.
And they made regular people feel outraged that this was happening in their name.
Outrage,
There was
yes.
outrage. The question is what is going to outrage us now? And what are those media companies going to be able to do?
But did the outrage move to act? So people were outraged because I remember
Yes.
the outrage. Then what happened? Like, where did it go?
Right. Well, that ultimately, I remember I was talking with a mutual friend of ours during that time, Alita Garcia, and I was
Alita. Shout
I
out.
was like, Alita, like people actually care about immigration right now. This is insane. This is crazy. Like they care. People care. We got to capitalize. We got to move. We got to do this.
I remember that conversation.
And what happened in the long term? Questionable. We also saw the Biden administration do terrible things with regards to immigrants and specifically at the border. And I think I would say that the right was able to shift the narrative again and make people not care about immigrants and migrants and make them seem like they were the problem and that they were the disasters. And so we weren't able to, for lack of a better word, capitalize politically, like make actual physical change in our immigration laws when people actually cared about immigration. This is what I was thinking about also on the way here. Donald Trump in his inaugural speech said that he wants to put a flag on Mars. 15 years ago, laughable. You're like, yeah, right, that's not fucking happening. No way. Now, possibly. I mean, you have fucking Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk trying to get to space and go to fucking Mars. Possible. There's a possibility that they might actually put that flag on Mars. Insane. And why? Because they want to. Because they want to get to Mars.
By the way, that's also a very masculine, let's go pioneer.
Let's go, discover and destroy and own it.
I just want people to drive legally in Texas.
Exactly.
I just want people to drive legally in Florida.
Yes.
I just want people to be able to, I don't know, drop their kids up to school and go to Target and not fall apart because they don't have a driver's license.
Yes.
What about, I have to tell you, whenever I hear people talk about space.
But this is exactly my point, Jose. Like, this is what they want. If human beings, if this country actually really, truly wanted immigration reform, we would get it fucking done. Because if we can get ourselves to fucking Mars, we can get immigration reform in this country done. Whatever that term even means
Whatever
now.
that means now, I don't know what
Who
it
knows? But they don't want it. Both Democrats and Republicans, they don't want it because they're afraid for a whole host of reasons of what it means politically to them. They don't want it. But we have to demand it. It's insane.
It's insane.
Kids are now like scared that ICE might show up in New York City public schools.
I saw that, by the way. Talk to us about that, because now I'm curious for you. So I've talked to you about this. So I am on the, Governor Newsom appointed me as a trustee of the California State University system, right? Which is the largest, just because it's California, right? We probably have, estimate 1 out of 20 college graduate in America gets their degree from the CSU. That's how big the system is, right? And we about estimate 8 to 10,000 undocumented students that we know of, because we don't, how would we know? And I saw your post on Instagram about know your rights. What is the responsibility right now of of schools, public, private, so that they know what to do when ICE shows up on campus? May it be a public elementary school, a private college, or a California State University?
Unfortunately, they have to know everything now because before there was something called safe spaces where ICE was not allowed to go into these spaces to do raids, to detain people, to do any of those things. So hospitals, churches, courthouses, and schools, I believe, were the places. Now that's up for debate, and Donald Trump is saying that those safe spaces are going to go away. So unfortunately, it is the schools are now responsible for understanding their rights in order to protect their students. And we're talking like elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, like of which in New York City specifically, there are obviously many, many, many undocumented students in these schools. In the LA public school system, even more. And these kids are now traumatized because of the fires that they've just had to live through. Yeah. So this is the world that we're going into, and this is what is astounding to me. I want to believe that our fellow neighbors are like, this is terrible, because it also doesn't make sense. If kids are not in school and they're living here, you're going to have a whole generation of children and people and young adults that are not educated. And if they're not educated in their basic elementary education in middle school and high school, how are they, if this is what you care about in a capitalist country, going to contribute to the country as a whole when they're having to work as young adults? Like, what are we doing here?
I think what you're bringing up, though, is not only the race, but the class part of all of this, right? The reality is, so part of the way Paola and I know each other is we were together in McAllen in Texas. Why were we there? I'm trying to remember. We were there.
We were there because that was a crisis under the Obama administration with
during the Obama administration. I was joking. I know exactly why we were there. But yes, we were there because back in 2014 when those young children were crossing the border, right, through Mexico from Central America. In 2014, that was the first summer, right? And President Obama, Hillary Clinton, all these Democrats were like, don't come, right? And then we were there, we were filming.
Yes.
We were filming. And then I had never been to the border before, so.
And neither had I, actually. It's a whole other world.
I didn't know that part.
I'd never been. Otherwise, I would have told you.
This is true. So I get there, right? I fly in, and then I posted it on Facebook, I think. And then Moni, my lawyer Moni, texted me and said, "Oh, you're there. Jose, how are you going to get out?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I have a flight to LA tomorrow on Delta Airlines. She's like, "You're at the border. Like, there's going to be a border patrol agent at the next to the TSA agent." And then did I tell you right away? I'm trying to remember.
I remember when you told me. We were in a restaurant. I think
we were in a restaurant.
I don't remember if it was right when you found out, but
it was right around when I found out.
Yeah.
I think it was right after I was on a call with a bunch of activists because they invited me to come.
Right.
And they forgot that I didn't have DACA.
Right. Yeah.
They forgot they didn't have DACA. So they invited me to come, and then we were on a conference call, and they said, "Oh, I think we can put you in the trunk of a car." You remember this?
I remember, yeah.
Put you in the trunk of a car.
Because there's CBP points all along.
Border Patrol.
Everywhere from the city. You can't get out.
So it's 100 miles from the border is a constitution-free zone.
Yes.
Which anybody can ask you at any point for papers, right? So the moment they said that we'll put you in a trunk through El Paso, all I can think of was J-Lo and George Clooney and Out of Sight. And I was like, I'm not George Clooney or J-Lo, and I'm not being in a trunk. And then I told you about it, and I'll never forget this. You looked at me and you said, "Oh, no, Jose, you have to write about this." Do you remember? You were like...
I don't remember this moment, but sounds like yes.
Yes. Because I actually thought, wait, what do I do? Like, am I going to be smuggled again somewhere to get out of this border? And you're like, no, you gotta go do your thing.
Yeah.
I remember that part. So
And you did?
And I'm saying this to remember two things. One is both parties.
Very important.
Mind you, of course there's exceptions. And of course there are well-meaning people that do the right thing, right? That are trying to do the right thing. But but this issue has kind of imprisoned both of these parties. How are you making sense right now, for example, of Senator Fetterman and Senator Gallego?
I just saw what Gallego said.
Ruben Gallego, right, elected in the state of Arizona.
Isn't he the first Latino senator?
First Latino senator from Arizona. So how are you making sense of Democratic senators, who are supporting the Laken Riley Act?
Yes.
And the thing that I remember most about that is any day now is probably going to pass the Senate to be signed by President Trump into law. Is that again, you just have to be accused of something.
Yeah.
So a cornerstone of American democracy, like birthright citizenship, is due process of law.
Yep.
But because immigrants are not seen as human beings, they're not afforded due process of law. Right? So how are you processing having these Democratic leaders?
So the betrayal of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to Black and brown people historically has happened time and time again, and women time and time again. I do not put my faith in politicians. Politicians are not my heroes. They are not who I want to be leading me. The state is not a place that is of comfort to me or provides safety to me. It hasn't been. Historically, it hasn't been. And I think we get really confused. We get confused messages about who are our heroes, what are politicians doing. Like, they work for us and they often betray us. So while I'm surprised by some of their actions, I'm not devastated by their actions. So I think what that means is that we have to protect one another. We have to take care of one another. And obviously, I can't give you papers and you can't give me papers, but there are ways in which we can protect one another and take care of one another under these trying and difficult circumstances. And this might sound like a contradiction, but I don't think it is, we need good, regular people that have clear moral authorities, moral compasses, I should say, and that are not afraid of or will be influenced by corporations and people in power and won't be not corrupted by power to run for office. Like, we need them to. We need them to. And if that is you, go do that and do it in a different way. Like, do it outside of what we have at this moment in time, because the system is broken. And I think we're seeing our country, the country has been broken since its inception, but I really feel like we're seeing it collapse in real time.
I have to say, though, and I'm saying this because I'm the person that's trying to get Senator Fetterman and Senator Gallego to talk to me.
Okay,
and
good.
This podcast,
and I think that you should,
because I really want to understand. I want to understand, and I want, as you know, with me, part of the reason why we're here, why we are nowhere on immigration in this country, is because we don't tell the truth. We don't tell the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's not, quote unquote, safe to tell the truth, right? I actually want a politician to explain the politics of this, Jose, does not make sense.
Right?
Just tell me the truth of that. And then how do we get to that point? Because look, a politician has one job, get elected. That is the only thing they care about. This is coming from somebody who used to cover that, right? They see that as their thing.
Well, I would say that's not what their job is, but that's what they care about.
That's what they care about.
Yes.
They don't see their job as, in a time when 33% of the population didn't vote? So now I want to, actually, that's one thing I want to ask you about, is how are you making sense? Paulo Ramos's book, Defectors.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I want an Asian version of that. I'm a little scared to look at what happened in the exit polls in Nevada, because Filipino Americans actually could be the margin of victory in Nevada, and I'm really curious how they voted.
Yeah.
How are you making sense of Latinos and Latinas who voted for Trump?
Paola Ramos and I have had conversations about this, and she's so brilliant in how she reported this out, and so timely, obviously. And I'm Latina, obviously, but I grew up part of my life in Latin America. I have a strong connection to Latin America, of which not is everyone's experience who's Latino in this country. Sometimes, like, you have no connection to Latin America. And I say that because having that strong connection to Latin America is not surprising the Latino mindset here in this country. my family in Colombia is mostly, all of them are extraordinarily conservative. When they started to immigrate to this country, they also remained and continue to be very conservative, of which my uncle, first time around, voted for Donald Trump, who was just, a recent immigrant. All the reasons why he shouldn't have, he still did. Because at the end of the day, as Pao explains in the book, like, we come from a conservative culture that is based in racism, that is based in colonialism, that also has this idea of wanting to be proximate to whiteness, of which some Latinos are and some aren't, and it's how you identify. And so all of it makes sense intellectually, is heartbreaking in reality, and I think there is a way to get those people back. I believe it. I firmly believe it. It's sitting down. It's having conversations with them. It's being within that big tent of people that I talked about. That is challenging. It's really fucking challenging. But I think and it is giving people grace. Now, it is not what the ADL says to give Elon Musk grace.
The Anti-Defamation League,
Yes.
which has been when
I read that, I was like, you're giving him grace for doing the fucking Nazi salute? That's not what I'm talking about.
By the way, as you were talking about this tent, here again, birthright citizenship as a conversation. And all I think about is the work that still needs to happen between the Latino community and the Asian community as it relates to Black people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We would not have the 14th Amendment in this country if it's not for what Black people fought for, right? And actually, one of our interviews in the podcast earlier, a few weeks ago now, is with Gene Wu. He is he is right now the head of the Texas Democrats, and he represents a district in Houston where 1 out of 3 people is undocumented.
Whoa.
1 out of 3.
Wow.
This Asian American immigrant from China. He was a kid when he got here, and he said,
what I have been trying to teach the Asian community is like, friends, do you understand that your success, your prosperity, your civil rights that you enjoy right now was paid for with Black blood?
So we had this fascinating conversation that actually blew up on TikTok, which is interesting. And I'm saying this to you to say, what does that work look like right now? I mean, we talk in our spaces a lot about intersectionality, but how do we actually put that into motion? What could that look like?
I was thinking specifically about this with another executive order, which was the executive order to protect women, which was the executive order against all the anti-trans legislation. And in one of those points that they pointed out, they said, I don't remember the language, but basically it was the personhood connected to, like, you will be a woman as soon as you are conceived as a woman, right? So it's like connecting personhood and connecting gender all together. And so to me, and this is important in not just gender and abortion, but across the board in immigration as well, our struggles are interconnected, and they attack us interconnectedly. So right now it's birthright citizenship that they're attacking, but in that same sentence in the Constitution, it says, and naturalized citizens. So when are they going to start going after naturalized citizens? Because they're going after birthright citizenship that in 2019, 2018 was a bedrock of the Constitution. I think very easily it can slip into naturalized citizens, of which I am one, of which tens and hundreds of millions of people are probably, maybe not hundreds of millions, but tens of millions of people are one here in this country. And so that's why, just logically, for self-preservation, take away the moral aspects of it, of which I don't want to, but like, it makes sense to protect each other when we're being attacked, because they're going to then attack the next person on the list. And we've seen it happen historically in other countries. We've seen it happen here. That's what we got to do. And so within that big tent, and racism is real within Latin American populations, within Latino population, it is deep.
Is real within,
it's real. And so we have to contend with that. And this is where it's hard. Contending with that does not mean kicking them out of the tent. Okay? I'm not asking my best friend who is an immigrant from Cameroon to have those conversations with my uncle or my neighbor or my Latinos. I can go and have those conversations with them, and I can battle it out with them. But we still need them here. And I believe I had a mentor in college, Tim Nubeni. He fought against apartheid in South Africa, and he told me when I was 19 years old, he said, it is your responsibility that if you are conscious, you have to take someone's hand and walk them through the door of consciousness. And it's really how I've tried to live my life in these spaces. It's very hard because sometimes I'm like, I don't want to fucking hold your hand and walk through the door of consciousness with you. I don't want to teach you what I already know innately inside of me, but I do believe, and I think this is what Tim said and believed in and spent his entire life working within, that we have to grow together. You don't know what you don't know. And when you know something and you choose not to want to know it, can we still like teach you slowly? It is a journey. It is hard fucking work. It is not for everybody. I'm not expecting everybody to do that. But like, we got to make our choices to do that work with specific people.
And I just have to say, like, you and I can go talk forever. And listening to you, the artist that you are, and the work that's ahead of us, we text quite a bit about Toni Morrison. And all I can think of, is this quote. She said, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal."
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely a part of that healing.
Thank you. I'm going to say one thing.
Yeah.
The day after the election, I read that essay, the full essay in The Nation.
The full essay.
It's
was
so
in The Nation.
beautiful. It's so beautiful. I highly recommend everyone to do it. But last night, Mateo was with me, and he was like, "Mama, I'm sad." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because of Donald Trump." And I was like, "Okay." We talked about it. And he's like, "I want to do a political cartoon." And I was like, "Okay." So we started drawing, and he was doing comics, and we like did comics for like 45 minutes. And he did his own little thing, called him a Cheeto, like whatever. It was very sweet, sweet. And then afterwards, I asked him, I was like, "Do you feel better?" He was like, "Yeah, I feel better." I said, "Okay. So remember, when you feel sad, when you feel lost, just go and create art. Just make art. And at the very least, it'll make you feel better." So I share that with you, and I share that with your readers as because if we feel better, then we can go out and eventually do the hard work that we have to do.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Our listeners and watchers, I think, are going to love this conversation. So thank you so much, Paola.
Thank you, Jose. You're the best.